Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. India has reported the lowest case count in 3 weeks. But the number of deaths is not going down and new complications are emerging even among those who've recovered from the virus. You may have heard about black fungus. It's a rare infection that leads to blindness, even death in some cases. Its cases are on the rise. Another worry is how the virus impacts children. They're being infected in larger numbers now. Asymptomatic cases are developing serious complications. The need for vaccines for children cannot be overstated. America has started the rollout for those above 12 years of age. Canada did the same last week. Europe may follow suit soon. So far, it is only the rich countries who can think about vaccinating children. Others are already suffering shortages for the more vulnerable age groups. But it's not all bleak. There's good news too. India's push for vaccine patent waiver has got more support, with the World Health Organization now backing India's proposal. And in the UK, they've registered 0 new COVID deaths for the first time since the pandemic began. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. Also on the show, 8 killed in a rare school shooting in Russia. 19-year-old attacker is arrested. President Putin declares a review of gun control laws in his country. Hamas fires rockets into Israel a day after hundreds are injured in clashes at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. We'll get your ground report. A city in eastern China is on the edge. There's a leopard on the loose, escaped from a safari. Zoo authorities disclosed it a week late. Now it's a cat and mouse game. And an American senator has gone viral for attending a video call while driving. Do you know what the call was about? To discuss stricter punishment for distracted driving. We'll bring you that story. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Good news, as the UK's alert level has been lowered from level 4 to a level 3. England, Scotland and Northern Ireland recorded 0 new COVID-related deaths for the first time since July 2020. Restrictions have been lowered, while Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged people not to abandon caution.
No evidence yet to believe that these variants are completely vaccine resistant. We must remain vigilant.
EU has sued British-Swedish pharmaceutical group AstraZeneca in order to force it to deliver 90 million more doses of its COVID-19 vaccine before July, in addition to the 30 million already delivered in the first quarter. China added 72 million people from 2010 to 2020, but recorded a growth rate decline of 0.04% from the previous decade. This is the slowest rate of population growth since the 1980s. The US Navy has used gunfire in the Strait of Hormuz to chase off Iranian vessel. It took 2 rounds of fire before the Iranian vessel retreated. This following what the Pentagon labeled as unsafe and unprofessional maneuvers by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in the Persian Gulf. Malaysia's now defunct 1MDB state investment fund has sued subsidiaries of Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan and Coutts & Co. to recover billions in alleged losses from a corruption scandal involving Malaysia's former Prime Minister at the state-owned investment fund. A 20-meter-long underground escape tunnel has been discovered at an immigration detention centre in Australia. Reports indicate that detainees spent 5 months digging the tunnel hidden beneath the chest of drawers. The tunnel had passed the first of the 3 perimeter fences and was 5 meters from the perimeter border fence. In 2020, the capacity for renewable power grew at its fastest rate since 1999. The rise of wind and solar power has been key to this new demand, according to the IEA. New renewable energy capacity in 2020 rose by 45% to 280 gigawatts last year, despite disruptions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tom Cruise is the latest among actors and network industry figures to distance himself from the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, the HFPA, following the exposé revealing allegations of corruption and impropriety, as well as no black membership. Russell Westbrook has broken the record for the most triple-doubles in NBA history. The Washington Wizards star scored 28 points, 13 rebounds and 21 assists against Atlanta Hawks for the 180th triple-double of his career, which bettered a 47-year-old record set by Hall of Famer Oscar Robertson. However, Westbrook also missed a three-point buzzer beater as the Wizards were narrowly beaten 125 to 124. The most anticipated boxing fight in recent times, Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury, is set to take place in Saudi Arabia in August. According to Joshua's promoter, Eddie Hearn, a specific venue and date will be finalized in the next few days. The all-British fight will be the first in professional boxing history to see all four belts being contested, and the winner will become the first undisputed world heavyweight champion since Lennox Lewis in 2000.
India's daily caseload has finally registered a dip. In the last 24 hours, more than 320,000 people have tested positive. This is India's lowest count in 14 days. For the past 2 days, new infections have been dropping. Major hotspots like Maharashtra, Delhi and Uttar Pradesh have reported a fall in new cases. Active cases have also declined. They've fallen by 30,000. For the first time in 61 days, India has reported a decline in active cases. They now stand at 3.7 million. Almost 20 million people have recovered since the pandemic began. But there is no fall in fatalities, and that's the worrying part. Once again, India has reported almost 4,000 deaths in a single day. The pandemic has killed close to 250,000 people in India by now. 250,000. The drop in positive cases is a promising sign, but we cannot say that India has touched the peak yet. The country's positivity rate remains around 21%, which means that more than 1 in 5 people are testing positive. India needs to bring down the positivity rate to less than 5%. Only then will the second wave be under control. And to understand how the surge is progressing, India needs to test more. On Sunday, India had conducted just 1.47 million tests. That's the lowest this month. Monday was an improvement. More than 1.8 million tests were conducted in the last 24 hours. In the past 2 weeks, India has conducted more than 1.9 million tests per day. And this has been the average. So we can do better. Meanwhile, here's a curve that has peaked, and that's the curve of vaccination. We are off the highs of April. India is administering close to 2 million doses a day. More than 170 million shots have been given so far. That's just 2.7% of India's population, which has got both the shots. Maharashtra has stopped vaccination for those above 18. The state says it will only inoculate those above 45 years of age. That's because it does not have enough doses. The centre has asked state governments to prioritize those waiting for the second jab. States have been asked to reserve at least 70% of its doses for this. For the more vulnerable population, India needs to do it much more aggressively. Last week, we also told you about a few trends, developments that could shape our pandemic strategy in the days to come. And one of them is increasingly becoming a challenge for India. It's called black fungus or mucormycosis. It's a rare and deadly fungal infection. It is being reported in several states in India, mostly in post-COVID patients, people who have survived the virus but now face a new battle. Doctors say there is nothing to panic about. But there are a lot of questions that are floating. What exactly is this infection? What's causing it? How many cases are being reported? Where are they being reported? And most importantly, is black fungus life-threatening? Our next report has some answers.
Sinonasal, orbital, and rhinocerebral. These are three types of mucormycosis or black fungus. Their cases are currently on the rise in India. All three types are equally dangerous. But what exactly is this infection? The Center for Disease Control and Prevention defines black fungus as a serious but rare fungal infection caused by a group of molds which live freely in the environment, particularly in soil, wet surfaces and decaying organic matter. People get infected when they come in contact with the fungal molds. For example, the lung or sinus forms of black fungus occur after someone breathes in the spores. In pre-COVID times, this infection was quite rare around the world, but since the pandemic, cases have increased due to complications related to the virus. In India, only a few cases were reported in New Delhi last year, but now the new virus mutant is driving a surge in black fungus infections across the country. Cases are being reported at hospitals in New Delhi, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Telangana, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. Who is getting infected or is likely to be infected? According to the Indian Council of Medical Research, 4 kinds of people. Those who used steroids during their COVID-19 treatment, thus lowering their immunity. Those who had prolonged stays at hospital ICUs and are yet to recover. Those with diabetes or a history of kidney and heart failure. And those who are on medication for major health problems that reduces their ability to fight pathogens. The infection typically starts growing from the nose, upper jaw, and travels to the brain. Experts say once it reaches the brain, it's almost a death sentence. So if you are experiencing any of these symptoms, see a doctor at the earliest. Pain under the eyes, one-sided facial swelling, nasal or sinus congestion, black lesions on nasal bridge, stuffy or bleeding nose, toothache or loosening teeth, and partial loss of vision. How do you protect yourself from such an infection? Experts advise the following steps. Wear a mask at all times. Wear shoes, long trousers, and preferably gloves if you step out into a park or for gardening. And maintain personal hygiene, including a thorough scrub bath. What about treatment? How can black fungus be cured? That's the big challenge. Treatment involves surgically removing all dead and infected tissues and administering a course of antifungal therapy, but the drugs used for this therapy are expensive and in short supply. The basic cost of even an antifungal injection is around 9,000 rupees per day. At a time when India's health infrastructure is already facing a shortage of supplies, the news of black fungus has come as an additional headache for doctors. Prevention is our best defense. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Be it nasal blockage, pain on the cheekbone, or numbness, when we adults experience these symptoms, we talk about them. We seek help. But imagine the plight of toddlers. There is no way they can explain their pain to us. Even those around the age of 10 or 12 struggle when it comes to explaining what exactly they're feeling, or differentiating, say, between a throbbing pain and a constant pain. It's the plight of these young ones that has failed to get a voice in this pandemic. Let me begin with a little recap. For the longest time, children were thought to be safe from the Wuhan virus. In April 2020, the United Nations in a policy brief said, and I'm quoting, "Children are not the face of the pandemic. They have been largely spared from the direct health effects of COVID-19. This is what they said. A Harvard study in August 2020 called children the silent spreaders of the virus. In other words, children were considered to be carriers, not victims of the Wuhan virus. But more than a year into the pandemic, children are dying of the Wuhan virus. Babies as young as 1.5 months are in need of medical intervention. They're showing symptoms like fever, cough and cold. They're also asymptomatic cases. Again, for the longest time, it was thought that asymptomatic children have low levels of infection. Turns out that theory too may no longer hold true. Asymptomatic children are now developing complications, life-threatening complications, weeks after being infected. A tweet about one such case was widely shared a few days ago. It was an account of a mother whose 11-year-old son had developed a rare and dangerous illness called MISC, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, MISC. The mother writes about her son's bloodshot eyes, rash all over his body, continuous vomiting. She says her son had difficulty staying up and responding. The child had developed a multi-organ inflammation by the time he was taken to hospital and examined. And the mother writes, and I'm quoting, "We were told that if he had not been admitted when we did, we would have missed the boat." The child began showing symptoms of MISC at least 4 weeks after being infected by the virus. No one knew the child even had COVID in the first place. He was asymptomatic. It took a life-threatening illness for the cat to come out of the bag. MISC was first linked to Wuhan virus in April 2020. Pediatric doctors from London reported cases of the immune system in children being triggered inappropriately after being infected by the virus. 1 year on, we still do not have a way to stop that. Why? Because we still don't have vaccines for children, at least the majority of them. In the Indian state of Maharashtra alone, more than 60,000 children tested positive for the Wuhan virus between the 1st of March and the 4th of April. There is an information deficit, no awareness about the kind of symptoms kids may show when infected or about MISC. What should parents be looking for? Our children today are battling a second wave unshielded. They're also bracing for a third one. Latest estimates say the third wave will hit India by October 2021, but no one knows for sure. And that's 5 months from now. Will things be any different by then? The only way to protect our children is by getting them vaccinated. And so far, only a couple of rich countries have begun doing that. In the United States, children between the age group of 12 to 15 will now be able to take the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. Pfizer's vaccine has been tested in the 12 to 15 age group. They were given the same dosage as adults. They showed the same side effects like sore arms or chills and aches. Last week, Canada included those above the age of 12 to its inoculation program. The European Union is likely to follow suit. Authorities say the EU could approve the Pfizer jab for children above the age of 12 as early as this month. As we speak, vaccine trials are on in children as young as 6 months old. And while this may sound morally wrong to a lot of you, to conduct trials on 6-month-old babies, this is the only way out. Vaccination is the only way out of this pandemic, and vaccinating children and adults alike is the need of the hour. Think about it. Will you feel safe stepping out of your home after vaccination if the youngest member of your family is still at risk? Seven students were killed, more than 20 others injured after a terrorist stormed a school in the Russian city of Kazan. Reports say the terrorist was 19 years old. What's more, he was once a student of the same school. Why then did he take up arms against it? The incident has forced Russia to consider amending its gun laws. It has also raised important questions for parents worldwide. As we eagerly wait for schools to reopen, we must also ask ourselves whether schools are safe for our children and what governments need to do to ensure that they're safe. Here's a report.
They died right here on the 3rd floor. The terrorist has been arrested.
The Russian city of Kazan woke up to sounds of gunfire and blaring ambulances. The city's school number 175 had come under a terror attack. A gunman had stormed into the building, broken the children's safety net. It was 9:20 a.m. local time. The school sent an SOS signal. Soon, emergency vehicles rushed to the spot. Students were seen fleeing their school. Some jumped from the building. At least 2 of them died because of fall injuries. Hours later, the final death toll was released. 7 students had died, all of them 8th graders. Among the dead was also a teacher. At least 21 others are currently in hospital. 6 children are in the ICU. The man responsible for it all is all of 19.
The terrorist has been arrested. He is 19 years old. A firearm is registered in his name.
Some reports say the terrorist had studied in the same school. Why then did he take up arms against it? It's a difficult question for the city of Kazan to answer. Located some 800 kilometers from Moscow, Kazan is alien to this American-style attack. Reports say the death of 7 school children in broad daylight has left the city's parents hysterical. Authorities have pressed additional security in all schools, and Kremlin is talking gun laws.
Zolotov has been instructed to amend regulations on the types of weapon which can be in civil circulation in the hands of people, considering the type of weapon used by a shooter.
Weapons, whichever type they may be, have no place in schools or the civil society. How long before countries realize this?
Well, Russian gun laws are already relatively strict by international standards. It's relatively difficult to obtain a firearm in this country. You have to go through psychological checks, legal checks. You have to have a safe place in your home where the weapon will be stored. Going forward, how much further gun ownership will be restricted among civilians? There's certainly a very high level of proof that you are a responsible person to carry a weapon on you, and it needs to be stored very safely. President Putin is certainly insisting that something does change after this attack.
We started this week by reporting about 9 mass shootings in the United States over just one weekend. Second day of the week, and 7 children have died because of unsafe gun laws. Children are paying the price for politics, and this problem is universal. In 2011, 12 students in Rio de Janeiro were killed in a gun attack. In 2012, a 20-year-old stormed into an elementary school in Connecticut. He killed 20 children, all of them 6 or 7 years old. In 2018, a technical college was attacked in Crimea. Death toll, 20. We must keep in mind these numbers as we chalk out ways to reopen schools safely. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
There are always 2 ways to look at something, always 2 sides to every story. And you need to hear both before arriving at a conclusion. But when each side claims to be right, when each side claims to be the victim, who does one really believe? This is a question the world faces today, as the streets of Jerusalem and Gaza echo with sounds of gunfire and warning sirens. The clashes which began weeks ago are showing no signs of abating. On one side are the Palestinians who claim to be fighting for their land. On the other side is Israel, which claims to be only protecting itself from Palestinian aggression. The story is more complex than what meets the eye. This is not just a clash between a few protesters and a few troops over a few blocks of land. This has become a clash of civilizations, of 2 people who've always been at odds with each other. And this clash could soon engulf the entire region if both sides do not reach a consensus. Let me begin with the latest. The exchange of fire between Palestinian militants and the Israeli military continues. On Monday night, more than 300 rockets were fired from Gaza towards Israel. Most of them were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome system. The Iron Dome is an all-weather air defense system. It is designed to counter short-range rockets and artillery shells. And it operates day and night, even in bad weather. It can reportedly respond to multiple threats simultaneously. So this Iron Dome intercepted most of the rockets that flew from Gaza, but not all of them. 2 Israelis are said to have died in the attacks. According to Reuters, both victims were women. The visuals that have emerged show that paramedics could be seen rushing bodies of those killed in the attack to a nearby hospital. Several other Israeli locals, most of them old, were also injured in the attack.
We're standing in Ashkelon, a city in southern Israel. The house behind me was hit by a rocket overnight fired from Gaza by terrorists. It is one of more than 300 rockets fired from Gaza at Israel. Fortunately, more than 90% of rockets have been intercepted by the Iron Dome, but unfortunately, one got through and caused light injuries in Israel.
Now, in response, Israeli forces launched airstrikes on Gaza. A total of 150 rockets are said to have been fired. The Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry says 25 people, including 9 children, died in the strikes. 108 others were reportedly wounded. The suffering is the same on both sides. Similar visuals have emerged from Gaza. They show women and children crying and running for cover. They show people rushing for medical supplies. Among the children who died was an 11-year-old boy. Hundreds of mourners attended his funeral.
Why did you kill him? They kill and there is no one to make them answer for it. The whole world is watching. It doesn't matter if they kill a child or a woman. There is no one to hold them accountable for it. Therefore, it doesn't matter if they kill a child.
As the violence continues, anti-Israel protests have erupted in several countries. In Turkey, protesters set Israeli flags on fire. Thousands demonstrated outside Israel's diplomatic missions in Ankara and Istanbul. Not too far away in Morocco, there were protests in Casablanca. Thousands came out to express their solidarity with Palestinians in Jerusalem. Same in Jordan. At least 1,500 people from all kinds of political backgrounds and ideologies rallied in Amman, demanding the expulsion of the Israeli ambassador to their country. Arab leaders have responded too. The Foreign Ministry of Saudi Arabia has condemned the violence. The statement says, and I'm quoting, "The kingdom calls upon the international community to hold the Israeli occupier responsible and to halt immediately this escalation that goes against every international norm and convention." The Foreign Ministry of Syria has reiterated these sentiments. It has said, and I'm quoting again, "The authorities of Israeli occupation and their flocks of settlers continue their unjust and shared aggression against the Palestinian people under a usurping occupation that does not respect the international law nor the Geneva Accords of 1949. Jordan's monarchy has condemned Israel's actions, and this is what their statement says. His Highness King Abdullah II ensured in a phone call with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas his rejection of the Israeli authorities' attempts to change the demographic situation in East Jerusalem. The Islamic world has united against Israel. Even countries that very recently normalized ties with Israel, they're speaking against it. Back in Jerusalem, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, remains undeterred. He has vowed to increase the frequency of the attacks. He says Hamas will be getting blows it cannot predict.
We are at the height of a campaign. Since yesterday, the IDF executed hundreds of attacks on Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza. We targeted commanders. We hit many of their quality targets. At the conclusion of a situational assessment, it was decided that both the might of the attacks and the frequency of the attacks will be increased. Hamas will be getting blows it didn't expect.
Yesterday we told you this conflict has all the makings of a third intifada. As both sides use indiscriminate force and inflict casualties, the question of who is right and who isn't is already going up in smoke. What remains is a festering conflict, a decades-old war that 5 peace deals could not end. And West Asia is becoming a major headache for Joe Biden, the US president. What's happening in Israel does not help. What's happening with Iran is perhaps even worse. First, the United States Navy seized a massive arms shipment in the Arabian Sea. Yemen claims Iran was sending these weapons to the Houthis to fight the civil war. And today the American Navy had a direct face-off with Iranian vessels. Is the Biden administration stumbling on the Iran challenge? Our next report gets you more about the rising tensions.
Not away. 252 WCO.
Dozens of anti-tank missiles, hundreds of machine guns, thousands of assault rifles, and several sniper rifles and grenade launchers. This staggering cache of weapons was seized by the United States Navy in the Arabian Sea 2 days ago.
Guys turning inbound.
These supplies are big enough to start a war. The question is, who did they belong to? And who were they meant for? The reports quoting an American official claim Iran was behind this vessel filled with weapons. Yemen says they were meant for the Houthi rebels. It says Tehran is trying to arm the Houthis to keep the devastating civil war going. This is despite a United Nations arms embargo. What is Iran's response? It has stepped up its activities on the high seas. On Tuesday, 13 Iranian vessels came close to U.S. Navy ships in the Strait of Hormuz. These were fast boats, and they were barely 450 feet away from 6 American military vessels. The U.S. Navy chose to respond. They fired as many as 30 warning shots to fend off the Iranian boats.
Earlier today, a large group of Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, also known as the IRGCN, fast boats, conducted unsafe and unprofessional maneuvers and failed to exercise due regard for the safety of U.S. forces as required under international law, while operating in close proximity to U.S. naval vessels that were transiting the Strait of Hormuz.
After taking office, U.S. President Joe Biden has pushed for a permanent resolution to the war in Yemen. Biden has suspended U.S. support for the Saudi-led offensive against the Houthis. He has also placed a temporary hold on arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the UAE and overturned Donald Trump's decision to label the Houthis a terrorist group. But these measures have not stopped the fighting. It appears that the Houthis do not want the war to end. They first rejected a peace proposal from Saudi Arabia and then stepped up attacks on Riyadh. The Houthis targeted Saudi oil infrastructure with missiles and drones. Critics say even Iran has been acting in bad faith. Before the giant cache of weapons was intercepted, Iranian officials were openly boasting about arming the Houthis. An official of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps reveals how Iran is backing the Houthis by providing weapons and sharing technology to build arms. This report goes on to claim that the same weapons technology was used by the Houthis to attack Saudi Arabia. All this puts more pressure on America's negotiations to restore the Iran nuclear deal. With tensions rising in West Asia, the U.S. president is running out of options. Just like his predecessors, Joe Biden is stumbling in West Asia. Bureau Report, World is One.
How do you convince those still hesitant?
Apple is the world's most valuable company. 2 weeks ago, Apple reported historic sales numbers, profits surging by a whopping 110%. For the March quarter, the company earned more than $23 billion in profits. But do you know how Apple earned all of this money? By working with companies which use forced Uyghur labor in China. That's the claim of a new report. It says 7 Apple suppliers in China are using forced labor from Xinjiang. They participate in state-run programs, the same ones that are allegedly part of China's campaign of genocide against the Uyghurs. They're called poverty alleviation programs. Now, if you followed the show, you would know the truth about these re-education / poverty alleviation / integration programs that China runs. More than 1 million Uyghurs have been moved to concentration camps in Xinjiang. There they are tortured, sexually abused, raped, and forced to pledge their allegiance to the Communist Party of China. And all of this is a matter of record. There are enough and more testimonies. From these concentration camps, thousands are transferred and forced to work in factories across China. And we've reported extensively on this. The United States says China is committing genocide against the Uyghurs. But American companies have no hesitation in working with firms that employ forced labor. And Apple is a repeat offender. In December last year, similar charges had come to light against Lens Technology. Lens Technology is a Chinese supplier of Apple. This firm allegedly used thousands of forced laborers from Xinjiang. In March 2020, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute published a detailed case study about Apple's operations in China. It describes how thousands of Uyghur workers were sent to at least 4 Apple suppliers. One of them was called O-Film. O-Film was using hundreds of Uyghurs as forced labor. And here is what's shocking about all of this. Apple CEO Tim Cook visited one of the O-Film factories during his trip to China in 2017. What did he do there? He praised O-Film for its quote-unquote humane approach towards employees. The statement was later deleted from Apple's website. Back in America, Apple was allegedly lobbying against a bill that aimed at stopping forced labor in China. And this report came out in November 2020. It claims that Apple wanted to water down key provisions of a bill that would have held American companies accountable for using forced Uyghur labor. Apple was lobbying against it. It did not want accountability for using forced labor in China. The bill is still being considered by American lawmakers. It has not been passed yet. And now, Apple has been caught working with human rights violators once again. What does the company have to say in its defense this time? Well, Apple says it hasn't found any evidence of forced labor in its supply chains. That's convenient to say the least, and Apple might remain blind to this evidence because dumping tainted Chinese factories will not be easy for Apple. It won't suit them. 2 reasons. 1, because of the high volume of output from them, and 2, because of a potential backlash from Beijing. 2 months back, the Chinese state fueled a boycott campaign against leading Western brands, companies like H&M and Nike. H&M hoardings were taken down in China. Nike shoes were being burned with video clips circulating on social media. Why do you think Chinese customers suddenly dumped these brands? Because these brands, Nike and H&M, had dared to speak out about forced Uyghur labor in Xinjiang. China retaliated with a nationalistic campaign. Perhaps Apple fears a similar backlash, and those fears are not unfounded. But for the world's biggest company, this cannot be an excuse. As for China, anyone who wants to do business there, the rules are very, very clear. Either you're with the Communist Party or you're against it. And going against the party has serious repercussions. Let me give you the latest example of that. Meituan is in a soup. Meituan is like the Swiggy or Zomato of China. It's a food delivery app. Its CEO and billionaire founder recently shared a verse. It was written by a poet from the Tang dynasty. It mocks a former Chinese emperor who cracked down on scholars and burned their books to consolidate power. People were quick to draw parallels with the present-day Chinese leader. Was the Meituan CEO criticizing Xi Jinping? Well, that's how the Chinese establishment interpreted that post. And it had consequences. Meituan stock plummeted to a 7-month low. That one post wiped out $16 billion worth of wealth. $16 billion. The chief executive deleted the verse. He said that he was only talking about his rivals in the post, but the damage was already done. The company is now under an antitrust investigation. Meituan is only the second tech giant in China to face such a probe. Guess who was the first one? Alibaba. The company was fined a record $2.8 billion. That's the price that Jack Ma had to pay for a speech criticizing Chinese regulators and the Communist Party. So you see the pattern. Chinese companies do not have a choice. They must live by the law of the land. But foreign companies do have a choice. And companies as big as Apple. Apple's website has a quote from its CEO, Tim Cook. It's in big, bold letters. It says, "We do the right thing, even when it's not easy." But from the looks of it, Apple is once again doing the easy thing, even if it's not right. Have you noticed something? When you take an Uber, or any cab service for that matter, the driver is almost always on the phone. Talking to a friend perhaps, helping another enroll himself for the cab service, coordinating drop locations, even making dinner plans. And I'm honestly listing all of these from personal experience. Things that you cannot help notice / overhear when you're in a cab. There have also been times the driver was watching a movie or a music video on his phone or the screen in front of him. Most drivers are mostly distracted. And by being distracted, they risk their own lives and the lives of several others. And why just cab drivers? Most of us are guilty of the very same thing. We scroll through social media, we talk on the phone, we even attend work meetings while driving. Is it no longer possible for us to just drive? Must we also do something else parallelly? Why do we ask this question tonight? A lawmaker from Ohio recently participated in a government meeting while driving. This is Senator Andrew Brenner. He can be seen joining the call from his car. A couple of minutes into the meeting, the senator switches to a virtual background. The result is this. He's seen sitting at a fake office with a seat belt on. It would have been funny had it not been so dangerously careless. This happened on a day when the state of Ohio introduced a distracted driving bill. It bans writing, sending or reading texts while driving. It also bans taking photos, live streaming and using other applications while driving. Also banned is looking at videos. The senator exemplified all that is wrong with distracted drivers. Here's another question. In this age of GPS and navigation, can we really drive without looking at our phones? From cab drivers to food delivery executives, they all use GPS. Maps are integral to the service that they offer. How will they deliver our parcel if they cannot find our address? It's true that while looking at the map, a text or two are often opened, emojis are exchanged, voice notes are shared. But how do we stop it? Laws have been made to stop it. But have they made driving safe? Last year, India implemented its new Motor Vehicles Act. Under this act, a driver is allowed to use his or her phone only for navigation. Talking on the phone while driving can attract fines up to 5,000 rupees. Indian states are allowed to multiply the penalty up to 10 times. Has this stopped distracted driving on Indian roads? Those watching us from the country will agree with me when I say no. On your screen now is the UK's road safety code. It says holding a phone while driving is illegal. You can use a phone only when you're parked. Flouting these rules may result in a penalty of up to £2,500. You can also be taken to court. This headline from German Auto Labs says distracted driving is getting worse and legislation is not working. What we don't realize is that drivers using mobile phones are nearly 4 times more likely to be involved in a crash. In 2019, 3,000 plus people died because of distracted driving in America alone. Forget creating awareness about road safety. Today, lawmakers leading by example when it comes to risking road safety. Do you know what the US Senator said when he was asked about attending a government meeting while driving? He said, and I'm quoting, listen to this, "I've actually been on other calls, numerous calls while driving. I had 2 meetings that were back-to-back, that were in separate locations." You see, what the senator could have done is planned in advance, rescheduled a meeting, if needed, excused himself from one. But there's absolutely no excuse for driving while attending a meeting from a fake virtual office, a video meeting no less, and by being totally unapologetic about it. Uber should read a page from its website that says distracted driving accounts for 26% of fatalities on the road. The company should share this data with its drivers, create awareness among them, perhaps equip them with navigation systems so that they avoid using their phones for map. And the same applies to food delivery agents and companies. as for you and me. We only have to realize that replying to texts can wait, phone calls can be made later. It's okay to join a Zoom meeting late. Work calls are not about life and death, but distracted driving is. And now a story from Pakistan. For more than 4 decades, muskies have quenched the thirst of Pakistanis. During the month of Ramadan, they deliver water to fasting families in those areas that do not have running water facilities. But this group, or these people, are now vanishing, a vanishing breed. Our next report tells you why.
60-year-old Muhammad Ramzan has been a muskie or a water bearer for more than 4 decades. The age-old profession is now in decline as water companies and tankers fulfill the need of the residents. But during the holy month of Ramzan, his services are high in demand, during which fasting can be a challenge for some when the weather is hot.
This work is very difficult, but I have to do it. During the month of Ramzan, it becomes especially difficult for people to collect water from water points. So I bring water for them in the hope that Allah will bless me for it, and He will resolve my difficulties. I will also earn my living this way.
Muhammad Ramzan fills up water into a large goatskin bag, carries it down in an alley of Karachi, and up several flights of stairs to deliver it to a resident. His leather musk can hold up to 35 liters of water.
In Ramadan, the poor muskies have a very tough time delivering water to us inside buildings that are 4 or 5 stories high. The tanker people often do not even answer our calls. They also charge too much. We are really grateful to these muskies.
Water bearers have existed in South Asia for centuries, providing water to travelers and warriors during battles in ancient times. About 1,200 million gallons of water is needed in Karachi every day. The city's 2 main water sources do not provide enough for 20 million of its residents. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.